Tebrik ediyorum, teşekkür ediyorum. Evet, mikrofona biraz yaklaşacağım, kendimi de duyamıyorum. Güldahan abla beni aradığında dedim ki senin için mükemmel bir hikayem var. Sonra sunumu 1,5 ay falan uğraştım, en son bu sabah teslim ettim. Burak Bey bahsetti, bu tarz çalışmaların %90'ı İngilizceymiş. Aslında bunu burada Türkçe yapmak isterdim. Muhataplarımızın birçoğu Türk ama misafirlerimiz İngiliz ve yabancı dil konuştuğu için bugün burada İngilizce yapmak durumundayım. Sizden de özür diliyorum. Benim sunumu... Tamam, biraz şey yapayım. Biraz böyle kişisel bir yerden başlayacağım hikaye anlatmaya. Benim bu şehirle kurduğum bağın, ilişkinin tam orta yerinden biraz meseleyi anlatacağım. Ve bellek ve resilience, yani dirençli kent kavramına biraz değineceğim. Tabii bunu sadece ekolojik dirençlilik anlamında değil, kültürel, sosyolojik, psikolojik ve ekonomik dirençlilik gibi birçok alanda bu konuya değinmiş olacağım. Yani genel bu perspektiften bu işi birazcık değerlendirmek ve okumak, algılamak lazım. Yani detaylarına zaman kısıtlı sebebiyle çok inemeyebilirim ama siz bu framework'te, bu çerçevede bu işi anlarsanız. Bu arada galiba Fati Bülbül Bey burada. Çok teşekkür ederim. Bence bu konunun muhataplarından biri de olarak sizin burada olmanız çok güzel. Mimarlar Odası'na bu konuda çok büyük görev düşecek. Üzerine anlatmak istediğim konuda. Onun için sevinçliyim, en azından onların burada olması çok önemli. İşte nasıl ileri geçiyorum? Geri ileri. So my presentation today is about rebuilding memory of Kahramanmaraş. So I want to start with the personal story. Me being a kid in this ancient city of Kahramanmaraş. However, I had no idea that this city was an ancient city, because there's not many artifacts lying around telling this city is an ancient city. I did not know the heritage. So for Kahramanmaraş, for me, is a place where my family is from, where I was born, and that's it. So I remember a scene that I'm holding my grandfather's hand, and we're walking through the graveyard. There are so many graves, and I tried to read them all. Some of them died from a traffic accident. Some died of a young age. Some martyred by the hands of the French and Armenians. There are so many stories. Some just died, and they left no story behind it. While I'm thinking of these stories, my grandfather warns me of reading the gravestones. And he warns me, so do not read them. If you read them, you lose your memory, which is very ironic in this case. The story that I'm about to tell you is the complete opposite of this teachings of the local culture. So, plus, if I read all these stones, I have to recite Al-Fatiha every time I read a stone, because this is Al-Fatiha at the end. So I have to read, imagine how hard that is for a young kid, right? There's so many Fatihas. So, finally, we reach our destination, and we're gazing at this empty spot. There's no gravestone, and elderlies of my family look at each other, and they all say, they nod, and they acknowledge the tree, and they say, this is the spot. And it doesn't make any sense. There's no gravestone. So we pray that empty spot, and then after that we leave. And then there's a question in my mind. I say, where did the gravestone go? So there's nothing. So years later, after maybe 30 years after the February 6th earthquake, I found myself in a similar scene, where this time my daughter Esma holds his grandfather's hand, and then we're visiting my grandfather, who told me not to read those graveyards. So we finally reached the same destination, and then we did our prayer, the same empty lot. As you can see it here, we did our prayers, and then this time I asked my father, where did the stone go? You know, why did it vanish? And then I was expecting an answer like someone stole these stones. But it turns out the local municipality under Hasan Sukutu Tikel, they basically took all these stones and turned into sidewalks, sewer canals, and it was used for progress, right? So imagine the insult to my family's tapestry and the story. So this made someone very upset. My great uncle. He got upset and he said, so I would rather move this stone and give it to a mosque rather than turn into a sidewalk under someone's feet. So he raged, and one night he took the stone and he actually donated to a mosque called Chukuraba Mosque, which was damaged by the ongoing war, and it was damaged by the artillery shot from the castle to this mosque. So this was going under a renovation at the time. So obviously the Ottoman took the control of the city around 1517. However, there's only a handful of gravestone inscribed with Ottoman letters. So most of them are used for some building purposes, right? So in Turkish culture, cemeteries are the deeds of a nation. So we basically learn from cemeteries. It's one of the most important pillars of the bond established with the past, provides cultural continuity by providing important clues about the culture, art, belief, and sociological structure of the period with signs, symbols, and inscription on them. So if you go to any historic graveyard in Istanbul, you get a lot of stories about who that person was, how it died, and what it accomplished in his lifetime, or her. So despite the importance of graveyards in Turkic and Islamic culture, my great-grandfather's tombstone was vanished with many others. With it, the city's collective memory. So ancestral gravestones are not the only thing that we lost in Kahramanmaraş. With it, we lost many other important stories. It is clear that my personal story offers a powerful lens. However, the same thing happens for the lost spatial and cultural continuity experience in Kahramanmaraş is not an isolated phenomenon. Studies on post-disaster urban memory and resilience show that trauma is not only individual or psychological, it could be also spatial and architectural. And preservation or erasures of physical remains of such as tombs, traditional structure, or commemoration sites directly shape how societies process traumatic events and how they pass them on to the future. So it is an article from Wilson's study. So the city had many ruptures in the collective memory. All of these dates marks an important day in the Kahramanmaraş history. So today, the city's population barely remembers that its root of its Hittite foundation, Roman roots, Armenian residents, Mamluks, Selçuks. There's not even one architectural element that was left from Selçuk time. Not even Ottoman. It is only the Dulkadiroğlu era. So there's a few Ottoman artifacts that are lying around, but it's not. The story has not been told. And when I was doing this research, I did realize that Kahramanmaraş had fortresses around them, right? And this city was destroyed by the Mongols and by the Shah Ismail, which I had no idea. So there's a lot of rich history, but today we do not hear those stories, and those stories does not echo in the streets of Maraş. So due to these frequent changes of hands in invasion, plundering, and destruction, Kahramanmaraş have struggled to maintain continuity of collective memory. Perhaps this is why the most important story that should have never been forgotten was lost, which is the story of Kahramanmaraş. So I grew up with this story of Kahramanmaraş, knowing that there was an earthquake, and it happens every 500 years. And when I was in high school, that was around the time that it would happen. So we were expecting this, but the person who needs to remember these stories probably were not informed about these. So historical record shows that there's a multiple earthquake that wipes the city off the map. One of them is 1114, and it's described in the chronicle of the massive of Edessa, to modern day Urfa, basically. So, and it was at the end of it, it's very vivid, and the story is same as today. You would not believe it. Same thing happens 1,000 years ago, right? And it says the city of Marash was terribly destroyed, and some 400 souls were perished. So 40,000 people died alone in Marash. Can you imagine how populous this city was, right? Not a single one remained alive. This is the end of the description. So, and then we do know the similar earthquake happened in 1795, and it wiped out 75% of the population in Marash. This is an Ottoman era. It's very recent, and that's where we lost most of our buildings in Marash. So, however, this story doesn't stay quiet. It comes back every 400 or 500 years, and unfortunately, February 6, 2023, we were caught off guard again. So, it lost us 60,000 lives. So, Charles' license principle that the present is to the key to the past. So it talks about how geographical and forces works. However, the opposite hold equal weight. The past is key to the present. If we understand the past, we can understand the present. So knowing the past, remembering the recurrent natural disaster is a key to survival in Kahramanmaraş. So one thing that strikes me as an architect, knowing that this knowledge lies around, historical or vernacular building was not using the old building techniques like dowels and clamps, right? So we do not see these old techniques in minarets or mosques, even today. So lessons were unlearned, or maybe there were no one left around to tell the story, right? So maybe what I'm thinking, maybe Marash wants to forget what happened. It is a traumatic event. When I look at this picture, I want to forget what happened. However, forgetting means reliving that moment ever again. And then, so we do understand that these experiences and collective memory was not was not encoded into collective memory of our people, building practices or traditions. So it is also possible that these traumatic events were selected through selective memory and basically was meant to be forgotten. So there is a few trauma responses that we give to these type of events. Is one of them for victims. For victims, the collective trauma damages social bonds, impairing communality and sense of we, leading to crisis of meaning, disruption, and continuity and belonging. And the other thing that I'm very much interested in for perpetrators, for people who are responsible for these type of events, trauma responses and trauma poses identity threats, leading strategies like denying history or acknowledging responsibility, affecting continuity and group belonging. So when I look at the downtown of Kahramanmaraş, I see this amnesiac building effort. So basically tells us that it's like a building without any memory. So as if nothing happened. They just want to build. That's why the pace of this building effort reminds me of a big cover-up. I see that regret, I see that guilt. So I just want to also mention that. So it all ties back to memory. So memory plays a significant role in building resilient community by connecting people to their past, fostering sense of identity and belonging, informing future actions based on the past experience. In Maraş, history is not just a record of ruin, it is foundation for resilience. So it is an opportunity to create a sense of identity and belonging. So how we can do this is basically restoring our memory. So understanding social memory is that knowledge, experience, and accumulated wisdom are passed down within a community. and community system will be at its specific starting point because of the history of decision-making trajectories proceeding to the starting point. So basically, someone in our host history about 500 years ago made some decisions, or 80 years ago made some decisions, and today we live with that. We live with that decision. So our starting point is based on their decisions. So today, as an architect, as someone from Marash, as academics, we will make a decision, and we will not see the results of it, but our sons, our grandsons, our daughters, our granddaughters will live with this decision, right? So today's decisions will make an impact in 500 years from now. Nobody will be around, and Marash will be probably the safest place for the next 500 years. However, so people before us, we did not get these stories. And today, we live with it, and 60,000 lives was lost, right? So that's why it's important to restore memory. Restoring memory can be done in a few ways, like rediscovering lost knowledge, oral transmission and knowledge sharing, learning from the past disasters, preservation of heritage and identity. We mentioned some of these topics in previous sessions. However, I just wanted to just sum up some of that. So imagine knowing the second earthquake that happens in Elbistan, right? So I have lost a friend, very dear to my heart, in the second earthquake. He was from New York, he was visiting a family, and he lost his life with his 2 kids and wife. All of them were friends. So, did he know that the second earthquake would hit? He would not get into that house, right? Such an important thing. So we see that Similu Island residents have survived a tsunami because they had this residual information about the past tsunami hitting the neighborhood, right? They found evacuation routes, and they were able to save 78,000 people's life, just because that they had the knowledge. So today there will be another earthquake. It's coming, as we know, it's moving up north, right? And these cities will be affected again. So this is an historical fact. And imagine knowing this, right? Or imagine knowing local or vernacular building techniques that actually survive even today, and imagining carrying that message into the next and upcoming generations. So this is our responsibility. So can architecture or built environment cure trauma through memory? So when I mentioned this to my wife is a psychologist, she got really upset, and she says, of course not, you still need psychologists. So I agree with that. However, the architecture contributes to healing trauma by providing a medium for the discipline to process and respond to traumatic events through representation, analysis, and critical reflection. Recreating familiar and historically significant environments that foster a sense of continuity, belonging, and identity after destruction. Creating a memorial spaces that facilitate emotional learning and collective remembrance of traumatic past. Prioritizing on-site construction that respects the attachment of communities to their original landscape and support social coherence. Preserving and transmitting memories of past events to enhance risk awareness, as I mentioned before, inform future actions, and build community resilience. So, trauma can be healed through the built environment in various ways, primarily by engaging with memory, fostering sense of continuity and belonging, and providing space for emotional processes and social reconnection. So I want to mention this, this idea of memorialization and affective heritage. So memorialization and heritage is another key element to healing trauma. While immediate reconstruction efforts might prioritize forgetting, critical architectural responses and memorials can offer a medium, a space to speak the unspeakable. I know today no one wants to talk about the experience. However, in psychology there's a saying that the mind wants to forget, but body always keeps the count. So these traumas live with us. If you run a survey among the victims or survivors of the earthquake, you'll hear them. Today, we don't touch their souls. We do not have a communication with them. That's why we don't know. So I have relatives who cannot who cannot sleep at night in the places they got caught in the earthquake. So this affective heritage, where the design focus on embodied emotional learning. And okay, these spaces aim to move visitors emotionally through difficult content, fostering a sense of I feel, therefore I know, which can be crucial in making sense of trauma that is fundamentally unknowable through didactic learning. So this is an example of 9/11 memorial. Truly represents this idea. So this is located in New York, obviously, and it's titled Reflecting Absence. So this memorial features two large pools and original footprints of the Twin Towers. So when the Twin Towers actually collapsed, they built those two poles, and it's called Reflecting Absence. And the design emphasized themes of emptiness and loss, symbolizing physical and emotional void that was created by this event. Next to this memorial, there is a museum built underground, and it keeps some of the artifacts there from actually from the site. As you can see, the columns and the fire engine and all the other things that was left for people to see it, in order to build a resilient community. And it was a place for remembrance and confronting history and fostering collective healing. So second example is Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park. So as you can see, this also carries the traces of atomic bombing. What Kenzo Tange created here, basically a guides for visitors through the sequence of monuments and tranquil green spaces. These progresses symbolize a journey from devastation to peace, offering quiet yet profound space for contemplation and hope. And again, similar examples in Berlin. This is the Murdered Jews of Europe, dedicated for Holocaust survivors, and it serves a similar purpose. And I want to show you a few more examples because we're out of time. This is Oklahoma City Memorial. All of these chairs represents the people who were actually killed in that bombing. And similar examples, as most of us are familiar with the Srebrenica Memorial Center, and all these tombs represents the people who actually died in that tragic genocidal event. And a few more examples that I want to mention because it's actually related to our case. Earthquake Memorial, Kobe Earthquake Memorial Museum. So again, some part of the city was actually kept as untouched to show what the earthquake effects was that day. So imagine they just lost 6,000 lives or something like that. It's like 1/10 of what we lost. All right. So they swear to God that this would never happen again. Today we know where Japan sits, right? And another example of a beautiful museum, which I found it fascinating, is Nojima Fault Prevention Museum. So they're not trying to remember, they want to prevent this ever happening again. So they built a museum on top of a fault line, right? That's, as you can see, I know we have it exist today. So there can be studies about that. And also, it's an education center for the generations to come. So I want to end my presentation with a solution for Kahramanmaraş. So I did create a Never Forget Fund. It's a case study, and it's sort of like step-by-step action for the creating a memorial initiative. So the purpose of this to honor lives lost, support survivors, and build resilient future for Kahramanmaraş and surrounding cities affected by the earthquake. So core pillars of this is remembrance. So what Maraş needs, based on the experience that I've gone through while doing all this research globally, so a permanent memorial site, a reflective public space in Kahramanmaraş featuring names of the victims, stories, of stories of survivals and symbolic architectural installation in perhaps a museum. Annual memorial events. So this is again Mimarlar Odası's responsibility. Hopefully they will have this accomplished. So there should be events that held on each February 6th at 4:17 a.m. and community gathering, exhibitions, and moments of silence and prayers. So rebuilding, also digital archives of what happened that day. It's very crucial so we can tell our stories for the people who are coming after us. And micro grant programs for families rebuilding their homes and small businesses restarting operations and students continuing their education. A partnership with local architects and engineers, perhaps also international, promoting earthquake resilient design and traditional Anatolian craftsmanship. This is where I think the identity comes in. So this is an opportunity for Maraş to become a center for earthquake research. So we have lived through, we have the data, and this could be one key component. Earthquake survival can hold us together. So I want what Japanese did, they create their own shaking table after realizing that their calculations were actually wrong after the earthquake. So I have a dream that Maraş can become a center for learning related to earthquake with universities involved and Mimarlar Odası as well. So and a few more, 2 more, and I'll be done. So education and preparedness, as we know, it's important in schools and neighborhood, teaching emergency response, resilience, and environmental awareness. So this has to be encoded into our teachings and our culture, and scholarships and workshops and panels, and again, cultural healing, cultural and psychological healing. So artist in residence programs, community art projects, and publishing fund. So these can be implemented. So again, one more thing that I want to mention. I started with cemeteries, and I see that the cemeteries today it needs more attention and needs to tell a certain story. They need to know these people died of an earthquake. I know it's tough, it's unspeakable, but I want to show you some examples that I recreated for our friends who died in New York. She wanted to have a sense of connection to Turkey, so her gravestone was designed in a way that tells her story for people who will come after her, that she was from Turkey, and this stone told her story. All right. So one last twist, and then my story. It's finished. So, pardon, sorry. So when I mentioned that my great-grandfather's stone was actually moved to a mosque, so just that moment I realized my friend is actually renovating that mosque. So I called my friend, I said, oh, by the way, so I heard that my great-grandfather's stone was actually donated to the mosque. He says, no way. I said, what happened? He said, you won't believe. We found a stone in the mosque, in the wall. Somehow it was buried into the wall. As you can see it here, it is written with the old Ottoman alphabet. And I'm glad someone actually took and made an effort to save, so I could feel that spark of connection to my past. So what we need to do is hold these memories close, stitch them into our cities with monuments, museum stories, not just to endure or heal, but to never live it again. So we do not need another earthquake to feel a connection with our memory. Thank you.